Well, today we are going to tell you a disturbing tale of a hospital and mosque, places which are meant to embody healing, compassion, and spirituality. But what Israeli forces say they discovered inside these sacred civilian spaces paint a far darker picture, one that once again exposes the true face of Hamas and how they operate inside Gaza. According to the IDF and Shin Bet, Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis was allegedly being used not merely as a medical facility but as a center for interrogations, torture, extortion, and Hamas's internal security operation. Not only this, but in another disturbing revelation, the Israeli military says it found dozens of Kalashnikov rifles, magazines, and other military equipment hidden inside two Gaza mosques. So how did a hospital become an interrogation center? Why were weapons reportedly hidden inside places of worship? And what does this reveal about Hamas's grip over Gaza and its role in blocking any path toward lasting peace? Well, stay with us until the end in this edition of From the News Desk, because the picture emerging from these investigations is far more disturbing than the headline suggests. And more importantly, it once again exposes the true face of Hamas, an organization that claims its mission is to protect Palestinians while its actions suggest otherwise. Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis is one of Gaza's major medical facilities. But according to an investigation conducted by Israel's Shin Bet security agency and the IDF, Hamas allegedly turned part of this very hospital into something completely different. Well, the Israeli military says Hamas's internal security and military intelligence services were conducting interrogations on the second floor of the hospital's outpatient clinics. In fact, the IDF further alleged that Palestinians brought there were subjected to torture and also to extortion. The investigation reportedly identified the Yasin building, where the second floor was allegedly being used for these interrogations. Israeli officials also said masked Hamas operators had been seen inside the hospital, including in areas where patients and medical workers were also present. Now, these allegations are especially significant because hospitals are protected civilian facilities under international humanitarian law. And the IDF says Hamas was exploiting that protected environment to maintain control over Gaza's population. In fact, IDF also maintains that this was not simply about hiding a few weapons. It was allegedly about governance through fear, while using a civilian institution to interrogate, intimidate, and punish Palestinians. And that brings us to the bigger question. Why would Hamas allegedly need a hospital as a center of internal control? The IDF in Shin Bet says Hamas has intensified its internal security activities as its support among parts of Gaza's population has actually eroded over the last few months. Their assessment is that the organization is attempting to maintain control through intimidation, interrogation, and torture, and the hospital became part of that very system. The Israeli military also described how different parts of the Nasser Hospital were allegedly repurposed over time. Certain areas of the facility were used as administrative office, a cafeteria, and later a place of worship before being turned into an interrogation center. Remember, Israel had also previously alleged that Hamas used the hospital for military purposes, including weapons storage and as a headquarters. Well, these are serious allegations, but they also come with an important caveat. The allegations are based primarily on intelligence released by Israel's military and security agencies and should therefore be understood as Israeli allegations rather than independently established facts in every detail. But if the allegations are accurate, they expose a deeply troubling contradiction. Well, Hamas presents itself as an organization fighting in the name of Palestinians. Yet the Israeli investigation alleges that Palestinians themselves were among those subjected to interrogation, extortion, and also to torture. In simpler words, the same population Hamas claims to represent has reportedly become the target of its own security apparatus. Well, here comes another worrying part. Well, the hospital revelation was only one part of this entire picture, because IDF says another civilian institution, the mosque, was allegedly being used for something very different from prayers. Now, the latest Israeli military claims involved two mosques in Gaza. The IDF and Shin Bet said they destroyed two Hamas weapon storage facilities located inside mosques in Shati and Deir al-Balah area. According to the Israeli military, the cache contains dozens of rifles, magazines, and additional military equipments. Israel also maintains advance warnings were issued before the strikes and that precision weapons and aerial surveillance were used to reduce the risk to the civilian life. And once again, these claims are based on Israeli military reporting, and independent verification of the contents of the alleged cache is still limited. But let's be very clear, these allegations fit into the much broader Israeli argument about Hamas's military strategy that the group deliberately embeds military infrastructure within civilian surroundings: hospitals, schools, religious buildings, and residential areas. And here the strategic advantage is obvious. Military equipment hidden inside civilian infrastructure is harder to identify and creates enormous risk for civilians if that infrastructure becomes the target of military action. Well, for Hamas, civilian surroundings can provide concealment, but for civilians, the consequences can be devastating. And that is precisely why these allegations surrounding Nasser Hospital and the mosque are so politically significant. Because the issue is no longer only about where Hamas stores weapons, it is about whether Hamas can continue operating as a military and governing force while civilian infrastructure remains intertwined with its own activities. And this brings us to the central question: can there be lasting peace in Gaza while Hamas continues to maintain its military and security infrastructure? Well, Israel says the answer is no. A senior COGAT official recently described Hamas as the main obstacle to improving conditions in Gaza, accusing the organization of interfering with humanitarian activity, exploiting civilian infrastructure, and attempting to manipulate distribution mechanisms. Now, the same report also said drugs had been discovered concealed inside humanitarian food shipments. Now, taken together, the incidents present a picture of an organization which is not simply fighting from Gaza, but attempting to retain political, military, and coercive control over Gaza. Well, that is why the Nasser Hospital investigation matters, and that is why the mosque weapon cache also matters. A hospital is supposed to save lives, a mosque is supposed to be a place of worship, yet the Israeli military says Hamas transformed parts of both into instruments of its military and security apparatus. And these revelations raise profound questions about Hamas's treatment of Gaza's own population and the enormous difficulty of separating civilian life from the group's military infrastructure. And perhaps that is the most important takeaway. The people of Gaza deserve hospitals that functions as hospital, mosques that remain places of worship, humanitarian aid that reaches civilians, and a future in which they are not caught between war and the coercive rule. At the end, the latest allegation from Israel may therefore have exposed more than weapons or interrogation rooms. They have exposed the deeper problems at the heart of Gaza's conflict: the continued entanglement of Hamas's military and political ambitions with the civilian life of a very population it claims to represent and, more importantly, protect. And therefore, the true nature of Hamas's rule in Gaza is out and open, and the allegations surrounding Nasser Hospital and the mosque weapons caches make one thing impossible to ignore. Any lasting peace in Gaza will have to confront the question of who actually controls the Strip, how that control is exercised, and most importantly, whether civilian institutions can finally be separated from the armed conflict. Well, with that, it's a wrap on today's edition of From the News Desk. Thank you so much for watching, and I'm Yash Goel signing off for Times Now Digital. Until next time, take care and keep watching this space for more such videos.